Good evening, everybody. So, a little while back, some of you may have watched already a video that I did about a small batch that I did using the 30-30 method, which is basically doing a 30-minute mash and a 30-minute boil in order to speed up the whole kind of brew day process and make things go a bit quicker. Myself and a couple of other guys who you may already have seen their videos on this. Also, we did it at the same time, and today I'm basically going to drink a couple of those beers and compare them and just see how they came out, considering the slightly unorthodox methods that we used for those. It was supposed to be 3 beers that were being compared, because there were 3 of us who kind of did this at the same time, so 3 separate 30-30 brewed batches, but tragically one of those beers was lost in transit. So the process for the 30-30, as I said, was basically 30-minute mash, 30-minute boil. I'd seen a lot of stuff, and other people, including Jamie and Chris, had seen a lot of stuff online already, particularly on the Brewlosophy website, about people, well, the Brewlosophy guys themselves, who'd basically been doing experiments into kind of short, and they call it short and shoddy, but basically shortened brew days of various forms. And they've actually gone down as low as I think even 15-minute mash and boils, but there's lots of experiments on there now which show that it is possible to do this, and that you can get decent beer out of it at the end. So we were basically just trying it out ourselves to see if we could do it and manage to do a sort of quick brew day, ideally under sort of 3 hours, or as close to 2.5 hours as possible in total. So anyway, that's what we did, and obviously the point of it was just to see if it would work for us, and whether or not we could sort of use this method more often to shorten down the brew day. Now, a lot of people will kind of fall back on what they believe to be established knowledge about these sorts of things, and say, oh, you can't do that, you'll get DMS, or you'll get poor conversion, or the beer won't ferment out fully, you might get cloudy beer because of starch that's left in it, again from poor conversion, blah 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 blah. Most of the people who come out with that stuff are just parroting things that other people, that they've read or that they've seen other people say, and they haven't actually tried it themselves. So the point of this was to basically test it out and see whether it worked. So that's what it is. The beers that we're going to be looking at, so my beer and Jamie's beer were both basically sort of based upon Sierra Nevada, or a clone recipe for Sierra Nevada. We didn't do exactly the same recipe, but it was ballpark, obviously mainly Cascade for flavour and late additions, and I think the bittering hops we used different things. In my one it was Magnum and Challenger, but being a 30-30 brew, those both went in at 30 minutes rather than at 60 minutes, so they're kind of borderline flavour hops as well, to be honest. Pale ale malt, caramel malts, in my case 40 Lovibond caramel malt, and a bit of Carapil, so about 9, just shy of 10% caramel malt and pale ale malt. So very simple, kind of classic APA recipe, but just using the shortened mash time and boil time. So for my batch, as far as the brewing of it went, everything kind of went to plan. I was a little bit short on the numbers, so the beer did come out a little bit weaker than intended, and that was basically just because I didn't really know what sort of efficiency I would be shooting for, bearing in mind that I was using a full volume mash, which I don't normally do, and just using stovetop equipment. So, well, actually no, looking at the numbers, well, the issue wasn't necessarily the efficiency, which I kind of got pretty close to. It was more the quantity of water. So I don't think that I used the correct settings in Beersmith for brewing a bag, because I was using a grain bag for the full volume mash. So I ended up with 1.5 litres extra. So basically the beer was a little bit more diluted than it should have been. So I got an OG of 1045 instead of 1052, and the final ABV was came out at, what did it come out at, as about 4.5%, I think, rather than kind of 5-something% that it was supposed to be. So yeah, ABV was kind of a mile out, but the gravity reading wasn't that far out, considering it was basically just the quantity of water that was wrong. So that wasn't an issue with the actual method itself, it was just that I didn't have the quantity of water correct for using basically a brew in a bag method, as opposed to what I would normally do, which is mash tun and batch sparging. Other than that, yeah, it kind of all came out as expected, and that was it. So let's have a look at these beers. So here they are. This is Mr. Walton's beer, Cortina, Nebraska. Can you see what he's done there with the name? 30-30 trial brew. Jamie was obviously a bit closer to the target in terms of gravity and so on, as it came out at 5.1%. Sierra Nevada style American Pale Ale. And here's my one. I'm too lazy for labels, so I just called it 30-30. But you can see from the bottle already that it's nice and clear. So let's pour these. So I'll do my one first. Well, I think the first thing we can say is there's not too much of an issue with the clarity on that. Crystal. So there's no, clearly no, issues with starch or poor conversion in that sense, that it's leaving behind solids in the beer. Lovely looking pint. In fact, that's a lot clearer than a lot of the beers that I do using the full length method. Let's have a look at Jamie's one. Smells lovely. Just bring that up there so you can see what's going on. Lovely conditioning on that one. You can see there's a really nice head on that. It's quite a bit darker than my one. I'm not sure what, I can't remember now what the grain bill was that Jamie used, but there's definitely something a little bit darker in that one. But again, clarity wise, apart from it being a bit darker, I can see pretty much straight through that glass. You can see my hand behind the glass there. So that's looking really good. Aroma on that is classic kind of Cascade aroma, nice and citrusy, and it's very, very similar for my one as well, not surprisingly, as they've pretty much got the same kind of hop schedule. Head retention's looking a little bit better on Jamie's one than mine. That's dropped a little bit, but it's not completely disappeared, so. Right, so nothing untoward with the aromas. Flavour wise, it's clean, it's crisp, there's no off flavours in that one. I mean, I'm not an expert on DMS because I don't think I've ever actually had a beer with it in, but you know, the descriptions of it are cooked cabbage or cooked corn sort of aroma, very vegetal. Not getting any of that. I think I would probably be picking that up if I was. And then let's have a look at Jamie's one. That is lovely. Bit more, not sure if Jamie put a bit more hops into that, but the hop flavour is a bit more prominent on this one. You can kind of tell there's a bit of a difference in flavour there from whatever the caramel malt is. There's slightly more of a kind of caramel toffee note on that one, which I guess is from the darker grain that was in it, but that's playing really well with the Cascades. Yeah, this one's a little bit more a slightly sharper citrus flavour. I think that's probably again because of the way this one's blending with the caramel malts a bit more. Very nice. They are very similar, but yeah, can taste a bit of a difference in terms of the grain bill. I think a little bit more of a prominent hop flavour in Jamie's one. The important thing is there isn't any off flavours there that I can detect anyway. Whether or not that's just my completely useless palate, I don't know, but I know that obviously the other guys have tried their beers and have tried we've tried each other's beers as well, and none of us have so far picked up on anything, and you know, we've had other people try them as well, so there's no obvious issues. DMS certainly doesn't seem to be an issue. Conversion doesn't seem to be an issue. I think we all had normal sort of fermentations, got down to fairly typical sort of final gravities. Clearly, you know, clarity wise there's no issue there, so we haven't got a problem with you know, any starch being left in solution and so on. It worked, basically, it worked. 30-30 is a legitimate method, and you can produce perfectly good beer doing it. I mean, this is quite a while after that first test batch, and to be honest, I have already used it several times on a few other beers. Basically, when I want to do a sort of smaller batch or a midweek batch or like a test run of something, I'll tend to use this method so that I'm doing it on the stovetop. It takes a lot less time, and it's just a, you know, quicker brew day all round. I still use the full length method when I'm doing bigger batches. I'm sure that I could switch over to 30-30 for that as well, but at the moment, you know, I'm kind of in my comfort zone on the bigger batches, doing it at full length, and I don't at this point really want to go through the hassle of kind of working everything out again in terms of my numbers and where all of that will fall on the other equipment. So I'm quite happy to, you know, I'm not saying that you have to use the shortened method or it's better than doing it this way. It just means that you can knock out smaller batches or even full-size batches a lot quicker. So I'm not, you know, I'm not an expert on the science behind any of this, but I think there are obviously caveats to this kind of experiment. So we've only used very standard grain bills and so on with this so far. I wouldn't rush into brewing a shortened brew day where you're using a lot of adjuncts or exotic grain bills where you've got a lot of stuff that's got lower diastatic power and so on, because maybe that's where you might run into the issues that people talk about. But basically, from what I've read of other people and people who are more knowledgeable than myself, this method should be fine as long as you're using modern, well modified grains that are going to convert really easily and be done well within that sort of 30-minute period. Other than that, it's basically just about adjusting your recipe so that you still get the right amount of bitterness and so on. So you might need to put a slightly larger bittering addition in at 30 minutes. Apart from that, it's all good. Your efficiency may drop a little bit, either because of the change in method or because of the lack of kind of sparging and so on if you're doing it that way. But for me, I was still hitting, on this batch, I still hit just shy of 72%, which is no great issue for me. We're talking about pennies in terms of the difference in cost for the amount of grain that you're going to have to use there. So yeah, I really can't find any fault with it at this point. Basically, if you fancy having a go at doing a shortened brew day, go and do it. So yeah, cheers to Jamie for this lovely beer that I'm enjoying here. It's very nice. Cheers to Chris, even though I didn't get the beer in the end. Not your fault, mate, but I'm sure it would have been lovely anyway. Yeah, I'll put a link to the original 3030 video. Also have a look on the blog page that all of us have written stuff up about this as well, at mateswhobrew.uk. Yeah, go and subscribe to the channels for the other guys as well who've done this, and you'll hopefully see some videos from them as well about this. Okay, alright, cheers guys, and good luck.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, that or his dudeness or duder or El Duderino.